Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome. My name is Guy Anderson and I'm the Associate Director of James Defence Industry and Markets. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this online intelligence briefing. And today, Craig Paffrey, who is our Principal Budget Analyst, together with John Gravatt, our Asia Pacific Industries Analyst, will present a session entitled East Asian Markets, Developments, Trends and Opportunities. The IHS James Intelligence Briefing Programme will consist of approximately 40 events during 2017, and it's available to all customers of James Intelligence Centre and Module products, and that includes the Market Forecast Series. So, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes my introduction, but just before I hand over to John Gravatt, I'd like to highlight that the information used to compile today's presentation has been drawn from a variety of James content, but particularly James Defence Industry and Market and James Defence Budgets. And with that, I'll hand over to John Gravatt. Over to you, John.
Thanks, Guy. Hello, everyone. So before we get started today, here's a quick run through the agenda. We'll start with a look at regional threats in East Asia before looking at some military procurement implications. That will be followed by an analysis of regional defence spending, and then a look at defence industrial capabilities and defence offset strategies before we get to the Q&A. Next slide, please. So firstly, we'll look at major regional threats and how these are impacting military procurement programs, and we'll start with a look first at China's growing regional assertiveness. Next slide, please. So to help China achieve regional control, Beijing is pursuing something of an anti-access area denial strategy. And this is channeled through a transition from prioritizing the protection of near seas to the protection of far seas. And for China, this means the acquisition of assets, including aircraft carriers, ballistic missile submarines, and other force projection capabilities such as transport aircraft and tankers. In addition, China has a very clear emphasis on boosting C4ISR capability through something that it calls informationization, and this is intended to provide its assets, particularly in support of air and naval platforms, with the advanced systems required to win modern conflicts. Other priorities are the development of so-called non-contact weapons, such as long-range precision strike, and advanced weapons, such as electromagnetic railguns and supersonic anti-ship missiles. All these systems, I think, can be expected to support China's anti-access area denial strategy. Next slide, please. And of course, it's not just China's assertiveness in East Asia that is prompting regional military modernization. In terms of North Korea, there's been more than a dozen missile development landmarks for the country in the past year alone. Not all have been successful, far from it, but I think that North Korea's new attitude towards failure in this sense is certainly likely to be more conducive to capability advancement. Most recently, concerns are focusing on North Korea's capability to conduct a hydrogen bomb test in the Pacific Ocean, which would almost certainly escalate regional tension and provoke a response from the United States. It's also possible that we'll see a pause in such tests, providing an opportunity perhaps for diplomacy. However, the fact that North Korea's missile program has accelerated at such a pace is clearly a major cause for concern, and along with China's regional assertiveness, it's prompting a specific set of procurement requirements across the region. And that's something. A look at South Korea's response to the missile threats it faces from North Korea can provide, I think, something of an indication as to the scope of investment that is being committed in these areas, in particular in Northeast Asia. So South Korea's three-axis defense strategy features the acquisition of a range of interlinked capabilities. Seoul has recently announced that it is planning to accelerate the development of this three-axis system by the early 2020s. These capabilities will be framed under three main projects called the Korea and Missile Defense System, KAMD, the Kill Chain System, and the KMPR, which is preemptive in nature and stands for Korea Massive Punishment and Retaliation. An illustration of the kill chain system is on this slide. And as you can see, it incorporates a wide range of military capabilities, UAVs, satellite communications, surveillance, airborne reconnaissance, and interception that will provide a sophisticated and a layered air defense system for South Korea. Japan is also pursuing various ballistic missile defense programs focused on systems such as the PAC-3, Aegis Combat System, and the Standard Missile-3, all of which are being pursued through cooperation with the United States. And of course, underscoring requirements in this area, the US has recently deployed the THAAD, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, to South Korea, while Japan and Taiwan are also thought to be considering the procurement or development of similar.
So we're going to look at, more specifically at defence spending in the region. We're going to split that into three actual different sections. We'll look first at current trends in the region, then we'll move on to look at three of the countries in more detail, and then we'll finish up taking a look at investment trends in East Asia and some of the projections for the next decade or so. So starting with current regional trends, these two charts show defence spending in East Asia. The chart on the left shows the entire region. The chart on the right excludes China from that view. So it's essentially limited to the accessible markets in East Asia there. And one thing that's immediately apparent is that spending is growing at a much slower rate once you take China out of the equation. In fact, spending actually fell in the rest of East Asia in 2017. That's primarily down to two factors. Firstly, it's due to declining spending in Japan. Mainly, that's down to lower military pension spending rather than any problem with procurement or anything like that. And secondly, it's down to a distinct slowdown in growth in Southeast Asia since 2015. By contrast, between 2012 and 2015, Southeast Asia had actually been a key driver behind regional growth. So let's go a bit deeper and look at some of the reasons behind this slowdown and the prospects going forward as well. The first thing I think that's worth establishing in this regard is that defence spending trends in Asia are closely tied to economic and fiscal conditions. You can see the relationship between the two in the chart there. Between 2005 and 2017, GDP growth averaged around 4.8% a year. Defence budget growth averaged around 4.6% a year. So almost identical. What you can also see, though, is that as of 2017, defence budget growth has actually dropped well below economic growth. Economic growth actually remains fairly robust, around 4%, but defence spending has been pretty flat for the last couple of years. And that's really because of the second crucial factor that dictates defence spending, which is fiscal conditions as well, or more specifically, rising budget deficits in some of these countries.
Brings us to a few conclusions with regards to the East Asian defence markets. Firstly, I think we can say that the threats in this region, in East Asia, are certainly unlikely to dissipate in the near future. They only look likely to intensify, meaning that the region's procurement drivers will remain strong. And as we've seen, defence spending will remain relatively robust despite some headwinds. In terms of modernisation, areas of focus are likely to remain on air and sea, as well as missile defence and C4ISR. Statistics also suggest that the major beneficiaries of this modernisation will be the United States and Russia. But I think it's also clear that opportunities for newcomers are emerging, especially those willing to collaborate with local industry. Certainly, foreign involvement will remain a key requirement in the region, given that all these countries face industrial challenges of different scope, and these various levels of capability represent both risks and opportunities for foreign OEMs. This focus on defence industrial collaboration, however, is certainly now regarded as the key driver behind regional industrial and military development, and certainly we see this strategy remaining as a priority for these East Asian countries for the foreseeable future. Thank you very much. I'll now pass you back to Guy.
And we look forward to welcoming you to future online briefings, of course. Our next online briefing is on 5th generation versus 4th generation combat aircraft, and that's going to be held on the 26th of October. So with that, thank you and goodbye.